Hi everyone. Okay, so for today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to create this tabletop Fusion 360 arcade machine. Now obviously this isn't designed to scale, this is basically for concepting purposes. And I'd say this tutorial is aimed at beginners because this object is actually fairly simple to create, but it's a really good exercise for beginners. So, you know, if you're familiar with the interface and you've designed just a few items within Fusion 360 and you want to learn a little bit more about the tools within Fusion 360, I'd recommend giving this tutorial a go. I'll be showing you how to create this from scratch in real time. I'll also be showing you how to apply some materials and how to add some decals to your design as well, and then we'll jump to the render workspace just to do a quick render of our tabletop arcade machine. Alright, so without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start off by inserting a attached canvas. I'm going to go ahead and select that sketch that I've applied. Just check the description. I've supplied a link to this image. I'm just going to select the following plane, and you'll see that I'm actually going to flip this horizontally to get it into the correct position, and I'm just going to scale it up. And like I said earlier, this isn't to scale. But if you were going to 3D print this, obviously you'd have to get all of the correct dimensions. So we're just doing this for concepting purposes. And then just getting that into the correct position. Making sure my opacity is on 60, and I'm going to put on display through so that I can see my sketch as well as the attached canvas. And I'll be using the line tool. And then I'm just basically going to trace over these lines. Because actually, yeah, like I said, I drew this earlier and I found that this particular sketch and the shape was really nice when we actually extrude this in a moment. So you guys are free to modify this arcade cabinet shape, but this is what I decided to go with. Alright, so just going back and making sure that all of my lines are connected so that I have a sketch profile. Alright, you can see now all the lines are connected. I'm just going to hide my canvas. It's turned orange. That means we have a completed sketch profile. Alright, so I'm selecting my sketch profile, right clicking, and I'm going to extrude. And I'll just extrude this out a little bit. So we'll say about 6 millimeters. And we'll click on OK. And we made sure that it was a new body. So you can see I went back into the line tool. I selected that plane on the side, and now I'm just sketching on the side of that plane. And basically this is going to be that inside compartment of our arcade cabinet. So again, just using the extrude function, I'm going to make sure my operation is on new body, getting it to a desired width. Once I'm happy with it, we'll click on OK. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this following part, and I'm just going to move it onto the other side. So I said Control C, Control V, and then I'm pressing the shortcut M for move. And I just move that into position. Right, analyzing everything. Now obviously I designed this. This is actually based off a design called the iCade. It's basically a clone of the iCade, which means that it houses a iPad. So it uses a classic arcade shape, but the fact is that it's a little bit more modernized and it accommodates an iPad. And as you can see, what I'm basically doing right now, I'm selecting all of these edges and I'm going to be applying a fillet to these edges just to give it a nice round transition. It also makes it look just slightly more modernized as well. Once we apply these fillets to the arcade machine, it's just analyzing the design until I'm happy. And you'll see that I actually missed one of the edges here, so I'm going to have to go back and I'll apply a fillet to that edge. But you can see I'm playing around with fillets earlier just to get the overall shape that I'm happy with for my arcade machine. And I'm applying fillets here to form a separation between the different compartments. And this looks really nice in the final render as well. So just applying some fillets to those edges. And I see over here, I'm actually going to notice that I forgot to apply a fillet to that bottom right edge. And I don't know how I didn't see this. It took me quite some time to actually take note of that, but it's not a big deal. Right, now you can see I'm actually applying a offset to that plane. And this is actually where I take note of that bottom part that hasn't had a fillet applied to it. So I'm actually going to, this is again the power of Fusion 360. I can go back in time, I can edit certain features on that timeline. Now I'm basically just applying a fillet so that it lines up with the fillet that was applied earlier, so that it's the same distance. And now I can go back and reapply these fillets that forms the separation between the different compartments. Okay, and then again I'm going to select this side plane. We're going to go and create an offset, and basically this is going to be the compartment that's going to have our arcade decals on it. You'll see that the one arcade had a Ryu decal and the other one had a Mario decal on it. So we're just creating that compartment now using the offset function and then extruding this as a new body. Now I'm not going to make this as thick as the inside compartment. So I decided that 2.5 millimeters was the correct distance. Made sure that it's a new body, and then I'm just going to Control C, Control V, copy paste this and press the shortcut M for move and just move this to the other side. Make sure everything is lined up correctly. Click on OK. Analyze our arcade machine, and it's starting to take shape already, as you can see. Okay, so now we'll be selecting that back compartment, and I'm just selecting that top plane, and I'm going to select the line tool and just draw across it because we'll actually be extruding this upwards to close off the back compartment of our arcade machine, so that it's enclosed. Just looks a lot better as well. Alright, made sure that it was a new body as well. Analyzing our object. Alright, so the next object that we'll be creating for our arcade cabinet it's an object that's basically going to hold our iPad in place. So again, I'm just starting off with a basic sketch, drawing out a rectangle over here, and then we'll be adding onto that rectangle. And there's another really cool feature in Fusion 360 that I've started using recently, and it's called Draft, and you'll see I'll be using it in a moment. And Draft basically allows you to angle specific or specified planar faces. And you'll see that it really comes in handy, and I didn't even know this feature was available in Fusion 360 until yesterday. So it's really come in handy. So yeah, this is actually the first time you guys will see me using this feature in Fusion 360. You'll see that it's called Draft, and it will basically allow me to angle these specified planar faces. Okay, and I'm just moving that into position, and then I'll be duplicating this object. Right, so Control C, Control V, and shortcut M again just to move it backwards. Then I'm selecting this top plane. I'm going to right click and go to press pull, and that's basically going to allow me to just pull this these planes, or just pull the object upwards like that. Alright, again, just adding some more geometry to our object. I'm going to make sure that my operation is on new body as well. Again, just readjusting its overall position. And again, I'm going to use that press pull command just to move it into position again. Okay, so for our next object, we'll be creating the iPad. or a mock-up of an iPad, a tablet. It could be any tablet. It doesn't have to be an iPad. And again, you can see that it was just a little bit off center, so I just selected those objects and just moved it into center. Right, so let's create our iPad. You can see obviously just starting off with a basic rectangle. So this will actually be a fairly large iPad. And again, just rounding off those corners. Because I don't think tablets have such sharp corners to them. So we want to make sure that we apply a fillet to those corners, make them nice and rounded. Once we've got our sketch, let's extrude that out. So basically, guys, our buttons that will be placed on this iPad, how it works is it basically syncs with our tablet using Bluetooth functionality. And like I said, this entire arcade cabinet is based off the iCade. I just like the overall concept of the iCade, so I decided to do something like that for this tutorial. And you can see, just using the offset function again, we'll be creating, I think it's called a bezel. So I'll be extruding this inwards, and then I'll be applying a fillet to that inner edge. See, I'll do that in a moment. And this is how you create a iPad really quickly in Fusion 360. Or it could also be a baking tray. I don't know, I've just always viewed iPads as baking trays. I don't really see the difference. Okay, so we've got our baking tray completed here. Just applying some more fillets to these edges. Right, and then once we are happy with our iPad, we can just move it into place. Alright, we've created our object that's going to hold our iPad in place. We're just going to just move it into position, but you'll see that I don't want my iPad to be upright like this. I actually want to angle this correctly, so I'm going to select all of these objects, shortcut M for move, and then I'm just going to rotate that. Alright, so that's looking good. Okay, so this next part that we'll be creating is the compartment for the buttons. So you can see I just selected that top plane and I'm just extruding that because I want this part to be raised. And now this next part that I actually create, you'll see that with the iCade, this particular feature on our arcade cabinet allows the iPad to be placed in a landscape position as well. So it's a nice added detail to our arcade cabinet. You can see just sketch it on. I'm making sure my operation is on join, and I'm going to be applying a fillet to these edges so that I get these nice transitions between different edges. You can see that just blends dynamically and it looks really, really nice. And again, I'm just applying some fillets to these edges. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of really sharp corners. That's why you'll see me applying fillets to nearly everything. But that's just personal taste. If you like really sharp corners, then there's nothing wrong with that. You can go ahead and have some sharp corners in your design. As you can see, again, I'm just rounding off these sharp edges using the fillet. Now I'm going back, applying some more fillets, and again these fillets just look really, really nice in the final render. And you can see I could only fillet that to a certain distance, but before I got that error message. So just be aware of that as well. There is limitations. And I think those limitations as well just adds another layer of believability in your designs, because it kind of prevents you from doing certain fillets that might be completely unrealistic and probably impossible to manufacture. So I like that feature of Fusion 360, that it actually it adds those limitations. And again, just adding some more detail to our design over here. So I'm guessing this is probably where there'll be some screws or some bolts that will be included on this design that holds our iPad. So I extruded that out as a new body, and I'm applying a chamfer this time, giving it a nice hard edge. I usually apply chamfers to nuts and bolts for those nice hard edges. Now I'm just going back and again applying a fillet just to give it a nice soft round transition between these edges. And I actually just noticed now that I forgot to apply that chamfer value to the other bolt or the nut that was placed there, so you guys can go ahead and rectify my mistake. And again, I'm just selecting this top plane, and now it's time to actually create the buttons. So again, selecting that top plane, I'm using the center diameter circle to draw that, and then I'm just extruding this out as a new body, and then again to give it a nice round edge and to actually make it resemble those classic arcade buttons, I'm applying quite a large fillet value. And you can see I made sure my operation was on join because I want this to be one complete button. So when I apply a material as well, it applies that single material to the entire object. And then you'll notice that the buttons actually have this concave detail to them. So in order to do that, I'm selecting that top plane. And at first I was going to use a sphere to create that concave indent, but then I'm going to change my mind in a moment. You'll see that. This is another way to create indents, by the way. You basically just create a sphere and then you'd cut that sphere out of the object. But I decided I'm going to use another method. So I'm using the offset function on that top plane. I'm just going to apply a small offset value, and then I'll be using the extrude function to cut down into the button, and then I'm going to apply a fillet to that inner edge. And you'll see in the final render that these buttons look really nice in the final render as well, and they actually they resemble those classic arcade buttons. I mean, that's exactly what we're going for, a modern twist on an arcade machine, but we're trying to keep it classic as well. You can see just moving this and I'm duplicating my button. Now of course I could have drawn out 8 buttons, but you saw that I did more than just draw out and extrude a button. I actually had to go back and I had to sketch on that object again and extrude and apply fillet. So I thought this was the best practice. Just create one button and then just duplicate that button multiple times. And you'll see that these buttons are actually not rested on the arcade cabinet. So I'm just selecting all of these buttons and then I'm going to press the shortcut M and just move them down so that they actually rest in on our arcade cabinet, because we don't want floating buttons, because how is our arcade cabinet going to work with floating buttons, right? Of course. Okay, so we've created our buttons, and again I'm just moving them around, trying to get the placement correct until I'm happy with the overall placement. Right, so it's time to create the, I think it's called a joystick for arcade cabinet. I stand to be corrected on that, but anyway, I'm going to call it a joystick. And again, just starting off just with a basic center diameter circle, extruding that up as a new body. You can see I actually put my visual style on shaded, and shaded gives you actually a more accurate representation of what your object is going to look like. So that's another tip. And then you can see I'm just using the offset function again, and we'll be extruding this up. And I'm going to show you guys a really cool feature here, again with Fusion 360. I'll be showing you the power of Fusion 360. We'll be using a sphere on this top plane. So I'll be making sure it snaps to the center. I'll be drawing this out, and my operation, I'm going to put my operation on join, and you'll see that I'll be applying a fillet to that intersection over here where it's been joined onto this cylinder, and you'll see that it actually blends. It creates this really nice blended transition between those two objects. But now I realize that my sphere was a little bit too large, so I'm actually going to undo this, and I'm going to redraw that sphere. Then I'll be applying that same operation again. But again, this is why Fusion 360 is so powerful, because you can just blend two completely different objects together dynamically, and it gives you a really nice blended transition. So again, you can see I'm applying that fillet, and it's blending my sphere into that cylinder. And we've completed our joystick. It's that simple, guys. And you can see just applying some more fillets. Since this is one object, you can dynamically blend these fillets together. And applying some more fillets. Maybe this tutorial should have been called how to apply fillets, since that's what I'm doing most of the time. But guys, seriously, it's just a rinse and repeat process once you get the hang of everything. So we've got our joystick, just moving it into position, making sure it's a little bit closer to those buttons. All right. Okay. So over here, I'm just viewing how I would actually remove the iPad out of the cabinet, and you'll see that the top compartment would basically rotate. And again, going back and applying those legendary fillets, right? Because they look good on everything. And something that I'm probably mentioning maybe a little bit too late, but if you want to apply a particular fillet or chamfer value to more than one edge, you just have to hold down Control, and that'll allow you to apply that fillet value to more than one edge. Right, so we're going back to that top compartment by the buttons and just adding some more detail to the compartment. You can see I'm applying a double offset, and then I'm just applying, you can see I'm just adding some small details, and just making the design look a little bit more interesting. And again, this particular detail looks really nice in the final render. Right, and again, just holding down the Control button to select more than one edge to apply that fillet value to. Then we'll just select that, and we'll perform an extrusion or a cut. And I think I am really addicted to applying fillets. I've only noticed it now, but geez, I apply fillets to nearly everything. But they look really nice. That's why I am so addicted to using them. Okay. As you can see, some more added detail for that particular compartment for our arcade cabinet. And again, going back and just modifying the joystick, adding a little bit more detail to it. Made sure that my operation was on join, then applying a fillet. Okay, and then I end up just adding some more minor details to the arcade cabinet on the side of the arcade cabinet. Like I add some more nuts and bolts, but I showed you how to do that earlier on that object we created that actually holds our iPad. So I'm sure you'll be able to actually do that now. You'll just select that side plane. But anyway, over here you can see that I'm creating the on and off switch for our cabinet. So again, just some small detail. But I think a really important detail to include in our design, because this actually allows our cabinet to be powered on and off. So I think the switch is really important to create. I decided to put mine on the front. You can place yours wherever you want on your design. I probably should have applied just a little bit more of a fillet value to those edges. I think that's okay for now. Anyway, that's how I would have gone about creating the switch on the front of our cabinet. Okay, so we're going to right click and go to appearance, so that we go into our material workspace, and I'm going into the paint category, and I'm applying a glossy black paint to our iPad. And you can see I'm just selecting this edge, and you'll see it turns blue to show you which edge has been selected, and then you can actually apply a different material to that selection. So that's a pretty cool feature in Fusion 360. And that actually this black glossy paint looks really nice in the final renders, because it basically it catches the lighting information really nicely and gives it a nice shine. But like I said, this part of the tutorial is completely up to you guys. This is where your creative freedom comes in. You can make your arcade cabinet whatever color you want it to be. I'm just showing the materials that I used in my project. And also, you saw earlier on that that gray paint that I applied. I actually adjusted the roughness slider, and basically by doing that, it allows me to control the overall reflectivity or the shininess of that material. So I don't want that black material to be too shiny in our render. That's why I just increased that overall roughness slider. Then again, just playing around with some more materials, applying it to our buttons. And again, guys, like I said, this is where your creative freedom comes in. Have some fun over here. Go ahead, play around with the different materials, see what works best. And you probably want to go ahead and apply material to that object that holds the iPad in place, like the object that's basically placed behind the iPad, because I actually forgot to apply material to that. Then again, that's not really something that you're going to see in the final render, but it's completely up to you guys. Anyway, it's time to apply some decals to our design. So I'm selecting that front face. I'm going to insert and decal, and I'm selecting this Fusion 360 arcade decal. It's been saved as a PNG, which means it has a transparent background. So that means it can be dragged and dropped onto existing materials, and it will basically be like I said, it's got a transparent background, so we can drag and drop it and move it around freely. So it gives us some nice freedom and possibilities for placing our decals on our designs. And if you look in the description, I have supplied a link to that decal. Now we're going to apply our REUPLOAD decal on the side of our arcade cabinet. Again, just rotating it, and you'll see that I actually forgot to mention this, but there's an option there called chain faces, and I'm making sure that that option is unticked, because if we have chain faces ticked, it's basically going to try and wrap that decal around the entire piece of geometry. Now, if that's something that you want to do, you can actually go ahead and make sure that chain faces is ticked. But since I wanted this decal to be applied just to the side of this object, I had to go ahead and untick chain faces. So I would actually highly recommend that you save your decals out in PNG format with transparent backgrounds. It just makes your life a lot easier when you're applying decals to your objects in Fusion 360. Okay, so let's jump to the render workspace, and I'm just going to do this briefly. We'll click on that lampshade. You go to environment library, you get to choose different HDRI images that you can apply that has lighting information, and we can just go ahead, and you'll see over here I actually put my focal length on 35 millimeters because I find that to be an ideal focal length for product shots. And then okay, so I'm going to go ahead, click on that teapot, let it start rendering, and since this is a progressive render, we want to make sure that our quality is on advanced for the best results. and just let it render for 5 to 10 minutes. And then you can see I'm just adjusting the overall position of the lighting over here. So, go ahead guys, play around with this until you get something that you're happy with. And congratulations, this is the end of the tutorial. I hope you guys have learned something awesome from this, and I hope you've learned some useful tips and tricks. I'll be releasing some more tutorials soon, but now you basically are equipped with the knowledge to create your own arcade cabinet. So who knows, maybe you can go ahead, create this to scale, 3D print this, and literally bring this to life. That's the power of Fusion 360 and another reason why I love this program. Right guys, well, thanks for watching and stay tuned for some more tutorials. Goodbye.